Recently, we received news from the president that our economy had 0% inflation in the month of July. President Biden is misleading the American people on inflation. It is true that energy went down, but other important items went up, like food. Over the previous month, food was up 12% on an annualized basis for the month of July. Electricity was up 19.2% on an annualized basis in July. Just to name a few items that went up in July besides food and power, new cars and trucks, medical care, and shelter were all costing you more. Don't believe what Biden is saying to you about zero inflation. Look at your checkbook or your credit card statement. You must protect your family from the ravages of inflation. You need to find out if gold is right for you. Go to blackandwhites.us and on the homepage, click on the gold bar and get connected to our gold guru, Ira, at Advisors Metals. And ask Ira, is gold right for me? It's time for Black and White, a show that wants to bring all of us together, talking again about the issues that concern us. It's time to hear from people who only want to deal with facts. It's time for you to re-engage in your right of American free speech. It's time for Black and White. Welcome back to this edition of Blacks and Whites, and it's one of our special editions, house calls dealing with doctors and medicine. And we are pleased, because of his busy schedule, to have on the show today Syed Haider. Is that correct?
Syed Haider, but yeah,
Syed Haider.
close enough.
I'm sorry. I apologize. He's on because he has some strong opinions about monkeypox and what's going on. Doctor, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I used to work as a hospital doctor, and then when the pandemic hit, those jobs kind of dried up. There just were no people in the hospitals anymore. So I started working online, and in the last year and a half, 2 years, I've treated tens of thousands of COVID patients, preventing COVID, and over 4,000 acute patients of COVID, and now thousands of long COVID and vaccine injured patients, or mRNA injection injured patients. I don't like to call it a vaccine. So I have a lot of experience with this latest kind of politicized, propaganda-driven, pandemic, case-demic, propaganda, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, around COVID. And when I started to see, this monkeypox scare, developing, it looked exactly, like the exact same setup as COVID. Things that we didn't know about COVID, we know about monkeypox, far earlier now, because we're aware of what's going on. For example, there was, Event 201 a few months before COVID. It was this tabletop exercise, governments around the world kind of like planning out what they would do, right? How they would deal with misinformation, how they would institute lockdowns and masking, and everything that happened was basically predicted by that exercise. That was about a coronavirus pandemic that spreads around the world, a new strain of coronavirus, right? The same exact thing happened with the monkeypox, thing. A year ago, about more than a year ago now, there was another tabletop exercise about, a new strain of monkeypox that's released by, like, eventually they figure out it's released by some kind of terror group, and it's been bioengineered in a lab, and it spreads around the world, and and what would we do, right? So the exact same. The most shocking detail about this particular this monkeypox outbreak is that tabletop exercise essentially predicted to the day, almost, right, within a day or two, when the outbreak would actually start. So I don't know what that means, whether somebody saw that exercise and was like, well, this is a great, let's just release it on that day. And so the other interesting thing is that it took us a long time to realize that COVID may have been a bioweapon, and not just a lab leak. We are far ahead of the curve with the monkeypox. This latest monkeypox strain. Robert Malone, the inventor of the mRNA technology used in these COVID shots, he has a Substack, and he's come out, heavily against those shots. But, he published an article showing the evidence for, gain of function on this new monkeypox strain. And just to, like, kind of simplify it, basically, this particular virus, this monkeypox virus, doesn't evolve very quickly, right? So there are far too many mutations in this current monkeypox strain in order for it to have evolved naturally from the last known strain, in Africa. Um, And like we were talking about before the show, I think one of the most important aspects of this to publicize is that it is an STD. It's a gay plague at this point, right? Um, but it could change, right? So COVID itself changed quite a bit. It either evolved or was, engineered into different strains that had different characteristics. Delta was a bit more severe, and then Omicron is spreading far more rapidly. So it's possible that monkeypox was engineered as basically an STD that would spread amongst gay men, um, and and eventually, I mean, it's not hard to imagine it spreading from the gay population into the heterosexual population. I mean, that's not a too big of a jump, right? So that may happen quite easily, but it could also kind of be modified or naturally evolve to spread just by in normal means, right? Another thing that I just want to focus on is I don't want to be like another scaremonger for this particular pandemic. I mean, obviously, if you're not a gay man right now, it's not something you need to really worry yourself about, but you need to plan ahead, right? See where this is headed, and perhaps be prepared if it does mutate, or if a new strain perhaps is released, that affects people who are not gay men. But I think the main thing we need to guard against is this out of control propaganda that I'm sure is incoming very soon. What we're going to see, just like with COVID, is we're going to see a sudden explosion in cases because of PCR testing, right? So again, we start off with not enough testing, no one's doing testing, and then we're just going to roll out like hundreds of millions of tests, and then people with like a herpes outbreak are going to be testing positive for monkeypox just because it's a high cycle count, same as with COVID. And then it's going to be used, I'm sure, to institute lockdowns, perhaps hand in hand with the COVID, ongoing COVID kind of outbreaks, or at least the COVID, case demic that's ongoing due to PCR testing. So, that's the main thing I'm worried about, that we are going to give up our freedoms again. And we should not do that, because it's completely unnecessary to have lockdowns or masking or any of those things to control this particular outbreak. You just need to tell gay men to stop having sex, right? You need to shut down the gay raves. This is what really needs to be done, and then isolate the cases and contact trace. Like, if somebody diagnoses monkeypox in a gay man, you need to ask, who have you had sex with in the last month, right? Like, we need to go and tell them. We need to go and find them and isolate them, right? I mean, this thing could be done with in a month, right? I mean, it's even simpler than what we had to do to stop COVID. I mean, to stop COVID, we had to like basically change the medical industrial complex in order to allow off-label prescribing and off-label, and for them to accept that off-label drugs work for this thing. That would have stopped it, but that's, I think, asking too much. It's that medical industrial complex has been around for decades, and it has far too much power. But this is just plain old vanilla public health, right? Isolation, and stop the risky behaviors, and we're not doing that, right? It was just in the news in New York that one of the public health officials was basically kind of like demoted, or like his position was changed, and he was silenced because he wanted to tell the gay men in New York, this is an STD, right? It's spreading by sex, stop having sex. And the public health department in New York basically said, maybe avoid kissing, right? I mean, come on, what is that going to do? You got to avoid the sex, which is what's spreading it.
Doctor, what I find amazing is that at the point in time, the World Health Organization declared monkeypox as, in essence, as dangerous as they did COVID-19. There were something like 6,000 cases around the world. And I'm amazed that they went to DEFCON 9 so quickly. However, what I think you just said is important to unpack a little bit. They can't tell, the left cannot tell the gay community to stop having sex because they're such an important constituent to the Democratic Party. And so they won't do that. They'll put the responsibility on all of us to comply. I said to you before the show that the media is absolutely refusing to say that it's a sexually transmitted disease between gay men. They're not really describing what it really is and how it spreads. I saw recently um, a doctor on television who was Dr. Siegel, who's on Tucker a lot and a lot of Fox stations. And he was talking about this monkeypox, and he was saying that he was concerned that we're panicking again when there isn't a need to panic. We should have never panicked on COVID, and we're doing deja vu all over again, as Yogi Berra, the catcher for the New York Yankees, said. And I find it amazing that the solution is huge government interference in our lives, which you just mentioned about the freedoms. But it is a way in which the government can control us, and there are a number of people, a significant number of people, who still believe that the government was correct in what they were doing with COVID. But there's a growing number of doctors and researchers and evidence as they're starting to collect data. I think I heard yesterday that this country of Sweden has banned injections of the vaccines in children under 15. Period. I'm not going to do it anymore. And so you obviously had a huge amount of experience in all the patients that you had. You indicated earlier that you had long COVID. Are you still dealing with that?
No, it lasted about a year. So it's been basically gone for the last 6 months. But in the very beginning, in the first 5-6 months, I had no idea what it was. I was just like, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I can't sleep, I don't know what's going on, right? And some brain fog and some fatigue and some strange symptoms too. My arms would fall asleep while I was sleeping, and that would wake me up, and I would wake up at like 3 a.m. for no reason. So later on I realized what it was. I mean, I started to do some lifestyle changes and some herbs and supplements, and I got over it. But I see a lot of people who still don't know what's wrong with them, and it takes them like months or a year or more to even like realize that either it was like COVID or it was the shot, right, that was supposed to prevent COVID, that triggered like the long haul symptoms in them, and their doctors don't know what it is, and they're not like looking for it, and they're just being diagnosed with labels, right? Like you have anxiety, you have depression, you have insomnia, you have whatever it is, but they're not looking at the whole symptom complex and labeling it correctly.
I am a long haul COVID survivor, and I have many of the symptoms that you just talked about. And my doctor said to me, when I had COVID, just after I had COVID, I had a heart attack, and I went into the emergency room, and they put in a stent. And I said to the surgeon after I came out, I said, "Is this a function of the COVID infection, because all my other arteries were all 70% clear, or was this the vaccine?" And he said, "Mr. Perkins, I can't tell you. We don't have any research. We don't know."
Yeah.
We don't know. And so you've developed something to help treat, and we're going to have to pause here, because I want to come back and talk about what you're now offering to people to help deal with monkeypox. So before we go, how do people follow you and get information about you?
Sure. Go to mygotodoc.com. That's mygotodoc.com. And then we have a supplement site at mygotostack.com, mygotostack.com. But MyGoToDoc, you can actually register for free and ask free medical questions. So it's a great resource for people.
Super. We are talking to Dr. Hyder, and he's a specialist who treated thousands of patients with COVID. Now he's dealing with monkeypox, and we'll be right back. The federal government just reported that the rate of inflation for the last 12 months was 8.5%, close to a 40-year high. This is Dan Perkins with Blacks and Whites. Prices continue to rise on other commodities besides oil. I ask you, what are you going to do to protect your money and your investment? It's time for you to take a serious look at gold for your portfolio. If you've had enough empty promises and misleading statements by the Biden government, isn't it time for you to take control of your money and your future? Go to blacksandwhites.us and on the home page, click the bar of gold to be taken directly to IRA and Advisors Metals to ask the question, is gold right for me? This is Dan Perkins. Welcome back. And we are continuing our conversation with Dr. Hyder. And now we want to talk about something that he's developed already to treat monkeypox. So tell us what you found.
Yeah, so I was turned on to this by the late Zev Zelenko. He was one of the early proponents of, multi-drug therapy and supplements for COVID. And, he, spoke to the president, at the time, Donald Trump, and he was, heavily covered in the media. So he saw Bill Gates warning against the smallpox outbreak, right? Kind of like a year into the COVID pandemic. And so he went on stage and he went into the media and he said, I found something that works against smallpox. The North American Indians, the Micmac, nation especially, they used to use this herb called Sarracenia purpurea, or the purple pitcher plant, which is found, it's native to North America. It's a wild plant, and they used it to treat smallpox. Okay, so that's where the story starts. And then, there were these studies published in the Lancet, the British Medical Journal, back in the 1860s, so a long time ago.
Wow.
Western trained doctors saying that this also is working on our smallpox patients. And then fast forward to 2012, a scientist at Arizona State University, William Arndt, he tests an extract from the purple pitcher plant, or Sarracenia purpurea, in the lab against smallpox and monkeypox. So he tests it against both those viruses, and he compares it side by side with cidofovir, which is the IV drug that's used for smallpox and monkeypox. It's only available through the U.S. Strategic National Stockpile, and he found that it worked just as well as cidofovir. It stopped the viral replication in the test tube. So it's important for people to realize that there's no smallpox treatment that I can easily prescribe right now, or monkeypox treatment for that matter. There's TPOX. Again, it's in the strategic stockpile, and you have to fill out 40 minutes of paperwork before you can prescribe it to a patient. It's hard to get. So I can't just write a prescription. You drop by the pharmacy and pick it up and put it in your medicine cabinet just in case, right? That doesn't work for this. And what we know from the COVID pandemic is, if you get it, you got to treat it on day one. Even before day one, you want to start taking something to kind of prevent yourself from developing the symptoms. And so why should people be? I mean, certainly if you're a gay man and you continue to have sex, you need to be worried about this, right? Because it's spreading in that community. And up to 10% of people who have it have extremely painful sores, right? They actually get 10% of people with monkeypox get hospitalized. That's another thing that's not really being, widely disseminated, this information. But the real thing to be concerned here is if it changed and started to spread, not through sex, but through, just regular contact. And it's not like the person has to have a sore on their hand and you touch their hand. It's just, the fluid coming out of the lesion, even if they wipe their bottom and some of that fluid, that infectious fluid gets on their hand and they don't properly wash their hands, or they touch their clothes or something and it gets on their clothes. So it can spread that way, right? It's not going to spread through the air. You don't need to worry about people breathing on you, but you got to be careful. This contact is the way it spreads. And eventually, it may make the jump, out, away from being an STD to just being a regular kind of strain of monkeypox, right? So monkeypox, the original strains out in nature, they're not STDs. They spread, just by contact. So this is just a way to be prepared, just in case. And so we developed this supplement, and really it's the only one in the world at this point. It's highly concentrated. I did find a couple of sellers on Etsy, these homemade things where they have a 2-to-1 concentration of a liquid extract of this Sarracenia purpurea. What we did was we 10x the strength, 10 times stronger. It's 20 to 1 concentration, and it's in a capsule, so a lot easier to take. And so that's kind of the thinking here, that it's kind of a just in case thing. If you're kind of somebody who wants to be prepared for every eventuality, I have it at home. My patients are getting it. And again, it's just kind of like plan ahead and be prepared if this thing becomes bigger than it is right now.
So let me follow what you're saying by to me I think an important question. If you're a gay man and you're having intercourse with another gay man and you don't have it at the moment, will this natural substitute prevent you from getting it?
It's possible, right? So we don't know. Again, nothing, not even the prescription drugs in the national stockpile have actually been tested, you know, on monkeypox patients in this outbreak, right? We don't actually know if they work. And in that pandemic exercise that happened a year before the pandemic, or this outbreak hit, the monkeypox planning exercise, basically, the strain of monkeypox was found to be resistant to treatment and resistant to vaccines that we have for smallpox right now. So again, I don't know, right? Because no one's actually used it in people, even me, right? Like, I haven't not yet had a monkeypox case come to me and say, like, hey, what can I do? What can I take? Um, but if something's going to work, you got to start it early, and you might want to take it as a preventive, and you might want to just take it, as soon as you think you may have been exposed, or day one of symptoms. Viruses, if you don't treat them on day one, you're way behind the curve. What, day one or earlier, right? You need to just wipe them out. You need to kill them. You need to stop the replication. So, we don't know if Sarracenia works or not. We just know it works in the test tube. The same as, that's basically the same information we have for TPOXX and cidofovir. We know that they work in a test tube. We know that they work for, like, the earlier strains of monkeypox in monkeys. Okay, they've been tested in monkeys. They haven't been tested in human beings. Same with the vaccines for smallpox, right? They haven't been tested, in human beings for monkeypox. So there's a lot of, unknowns here, and it's a matter of being, well, this might work. The same as with just boosting your immune system, right? Like, I would say, sure, you should be taking vitamin D, C, zinc, quercetin, all the things we used for the COVID, outbreak and the pandemic there, all the same stuff, right? You want to boost your immune system in any way you can. And if you can take a supplement that, at least in the test tube, has been shown to inhibit the replication of this virus, why not? Especially since it's an herb, and there's no side effects, right? That I can see so far. I mean, I've tested it myself. My family members, some of my patients have tested it. No one's reported a single side effect so far, even though it is highly concentrated extract, and it's also quite cheap. I mean, it's not like a $500 thing. It's a $50 bottle. So again, it's more for, like, the community of people who, they want to be like a Boy Scout and be prepared.
So where do people get this?
Yeah, so you can go to mygotostack.com. That's the name of our website where we sell our supplements. MYGOTO, my go to stack, STACK, like you're stacking something up. So mygotostack.com. And it should be shipping already. I mean, it still says shipping from August 10th, but we have it available. So it's August 11th now, and it is.
So uh, should people be taking this? You said if you have symptoms, it's almost too late. So if
symptoms, if you take it on day one, that's what we saw with COVID. If you take it on day one, you're still going to do great. Oftentimes you won't have, further symptoms after that. You may get better in a day or two. But you don't want to wait until you're 100% sure that you have COVID to start treating it. That might be day 4 or 5. That is usually too late. And the same with monkeypox. If you suspect that you might have it, you might as well start treatment, right? You don't have to go and prove it. It's hard to prove it actually now. It's hard to get tested for it. And so, like, if you have typical symptoms, just go ahead and treat it. I mean, it's not going to harm you to use vitamin D, C, zinc, quercetin, and this, herbal extract, just in case, right? And so what it can prevent is, like, again, we don't know, is there going to be a long monkeypox, like there was a long COVID? The concerning thing here is that there are signs of this being a bioweapon, right? In terms of the genetic code of this thing, how different it is from the older strains. And when you're dealing with a bioweapon, just don't take any chances, right? The same as with COVID. I just, underestimated COVID in the beginning, like a lot of people, and ended up paying the price, for this, this year-long struggle with long COVID. It's just not worth it, right? And who knows, we don't know anything about this thing, right? Like, what are, just like, you may have had a heart attack because of COVID or because of the shot. I mean, who knows what's going to happen, what we're going to learn about monkeypox in the next 6 months or the next year. What are its systemic effects, what are its midterm, long-term effects, for people who get infected and don't treat it early. So with COVID, if you treat it on day one, or before, if you do some preventive treatment, you can skip the whole long COVID thing. You don't have to get long COVID, right? You can get over it. You don't have to go through like 3 or 4 weeks of severe pain with monkeypox if we can find a way to treat it. And so if this, outbreak continues to spread and grow, we're going to figure out what really works for monkeypox. We're going to figure out if the Sarracenia seems to be helping people. We're going to figure out, maybe if ivermectin or some other off-label drug can be repurposed for monkeypox. We'll figure all that out. But at this point, we don't really know yet, right? Because we just haven't seen enough cases. We have 10,000 cases in the U.S. right now, primarily amongst gay men. And most of them don't know that there's anything they can take, aside from TPOXX or cidofovir in a hospital setting. But, again, it is really important. All viruses, you got to treat them very, very early. This is one of the, ways that studies for hydroxychloroquine were kind of designed to fail, and ivermectin, right? By the mainstream medical community, they designed them where like you could accept patients up to day 6 to start the protocols with ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. Another way they were designed to fail in a lot of ways. They overdose people on hydroxychloroquine. Some studies were just invented, out of complete, out of nothing and published. So this is important, that you should be ready, and you should have something in your medicine cabinet that may work, or that may at least boost your immune system. So in terms of vitamin supplements, all those things, they should be ready to go, so that you don't have to scramble at the last minute. That's what I saw with a lot of people with COVID during this COVID, outbreak. People were scrambling at the last minute. They're like, oh, I got diagnosed, now I need some meds. That's not the way to treat this thing.
So we've got a couple of minutes left here. So the difference between the monkeypox and COVID is that monkeypox has been identified, what, 15, 20 years? And there's some relative research. I apologize if I'm putting you on the spot, but I have to ask the question based on what you've told me. If it's a bioweapon, who brought it?
It's a good question, right? I mean, we can ask the same thing about COVID, and it's just speculative, right? I mean, some people speculate China attacked the world. Some people speculate the US tried to attack China and Iran, right? That's where it started. That's where it actually wiped out some of the Iranian parliament. That was like the second country that it hit. And these are two countries that are US enemies, basically.
Mhm.
So, Ron Unz has, a great argument that it was actually the US, deep state that spread this thing and didn't expect it to blow back on us, right? Just, and we may have been attacking China for years, right? Trying to wipe out their, pig population, giving them bird flus and stuff. So, at the end of the day, I don't know. But all of these things, all of these agendas seem to be wrapped up in a kind of a push to depopulate the planet. And so, why is that, right? Like, why do you need to depopulate? I don't think it's because of climate change. I don't really buy that argument. I don't think like the most intelligent people at the highest levels really believe that climate change is a real issue for the planet. And so what I think they're afraid of is just, 8 billion, 9 billion people getting fed up and pulling out the pitchforks and coming after them and deposing them, getting them out of power and overthrowing their governments eventually. And so a lot of the current ideologies and the current, what the current things are all about, like, dividing people, right? Creating divisiveness, right? And, getting people to not look at their similarities, right? Like, everyone in America used to just be proud of being an American, right? Now it's like, I'm trans, or I'm gay, or I'm bisexual, or I'm a wolf, or I identify as a dog or a cat, or, like 100 different, sexual identities. And then, like, all these animal identities are starting to come out now too. And then political divisions and, religious divisions and all of these things, they get people distracted away from what's really important, which is just I want to be able to put food on my table, right? I don't want inflation to eat away my purchasing power. I want to be able to take care of my family, and enjoy them, and live a healthy, happy life, right? And so I think there's a lot of divisiveness in the world right now, and it's intentional, right? It's being intentionally created. Um, and this thing, these pandemics scares are a way of controlling people until the elites can figure out a way to depopulate.
Yeah.
And this may be part of the depopulation agenda, right? The COVID shots and the COVID bioweapon itself, and perhaps this monkeypox thing. Um, and it may just be one country trying to attack another. I mean, that's also possible. Maybe China, was like, you guys attacked us with COVID, or maybe Iran, right? There are countries right now that are blaming the U.S. for having attacked them. Iran in the beginning actually, in their media was blaming the U.S. for attacking them. So one of those countries may have, suspected that we tried to attack them with COVID, and now they're, attacking us right
Counterattacking.
back. Something like this. Yeah.
Unfortunately, Doctor, we're out of time. It's been a pleasure and very informative. Do we two things? What's the name of the product? Where can we get it, and where can we follow you?
So that's Immunity Sarracenia is the name, and that's SARRACENIA. You can find it at mygotostack.com, and you can follow me, join my practice for free, ask free medical questions at mygotodoc.com. And you can find either website from both websites. So yeah, I highly encourage people to just be prepared and get in touch, contact us if you have any questions.
Thank you for joining us. We'll be right back.
The federal government just reported that the rate of inflation for the last 12 months was 8.5%, close to a 40-year high. This is Dan Perkins with Blacks and Whites. Prices continue to rise on other commodities besides oil. I ask you, what are you going to do to protect your money and your investment? It's time for you to take a serious look at gold for your portfolio. If you've had enough empty promises and misleading statements by the Biden government, isn't it time for you to take control of your money and your future? Go to blacksandwhites.us, and on the home page, click the bar of gold to be taken directly to IRA and Advisors Metals to ask the question, is gold right for me? This is Dan Perkins.